Hello and welcome to a very exciting episode of Diminishing Returns this week. We are dipping our toes back into the world of video game movies once again. What have we done in the past, Alan? I think we've done Mario, Sonic, Resident Evil, Pokemon. Is that right? I'm Sol. Joining me as always is Alan.
Hello.
And this week we have a very, very special guest, Ashley Esqueda. Thanks for joining us, Ashley.
Oh, thanks for having me. I am maybe slightly bummed that I missed out on the Super Mario Brothers episode.
That was one of our early ones when we didn't really know what we were doing. And yeah, it was...
Well, neither did they. So that works out really well.
Yeah, our co-host at the time, he was just venomous. He hated that film. He just couldn't wrap his head around the idea that I think you and I, Alan, both thought it was kind of, it wasn't good, but it was kind of so bad it's good territory. I think we both had good fun with it. Yeah. And I think that's maybe similar to this week. We're doing Mortal Kombat, the seminal fighting game franchise from the 90s, which I'm a bit of a gamer. I enjoy video games, but I never really played Mortal Kombat when I was younger, other than one or two, sessions at a friend's house. But I was always drawn to friendly Sonic the Hedgehog kind of games rather than the more grown-up violent stuff. Alan, I know you've dabbled in games, but you're definitely not what I'd call a gamer. Have you got any experience with Mortal Kombat?
I'm not a gamer at all, but that is mostly based on whenever I've tried to do games, I'm crap at them, and so I don't get into it. And Mortal Kombat definitely falls into that category of, I would just randomly hit buttons and hope that I punch and kick in the right direction. I didn't know what I was doing. And so I never have any fun doing it.
But that's kind of how I am with Mortal Kombat. I struggle to believe there are people who actually know how to play it, because I actually, just to kind of do a bit of research for this episode, I thought, I better refresh my memory, play some of the old classics, and I booted up some of the old Mortal Kombat games earlier today, and I couldn't get past round one in most cases. It was so difficult. Ashley, do you have a history with the games at all?
I may have too much history with this game. I played this game. There were many trips to Blockbuster Video.
Oh yeah,
and many trips to begging my mom to let me get Mortal Kombat, because I was, so Mortal Kombat was really big in the early 90s. This movie came out after the first Mortal Kombat game came out, I think, and I was a plucky young preteen and with no friends except my video game consoles and my Sega Genesis. And so I had a Sega and a Nintendo, and that was my whole personality. So yeah, I played a lot of Mortal Kombat. There are a lot of people out there who would suggest that playing such a violent game would somehow warp your mind in a negative way. But really, for me, it just taught me that extreme violence was very funny. And so when they said they were going to make a movie, I was pretty excited about it. And I remember not being allowed to see it in theaters. I could not go see it. But when it came out on video, I certainly, once again, begged my mother, who allowed me to run rampant like a feral child and watch a movie meant for adults. So yeah, I loved this movie. I rented it many times, and I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it going back to it, because they're making a new one now this year. Yeah, so going back to watch this movie, I was talking about it with my best friend last night, and he was like, well, at least it's better than the Street Fighter movie. And I'm like, is it though? Is it? Because maybe it is. I mean, Street Fighter had Raul Julia, and I think that's, it's tough to beat Raul Julia in anything. But yeah, Mortal Kombat, I have a lot of love for this franchise. A lot of love for it. And also, I think we can all agree that this soundtrack fucking slaps. Still a banger to this day. You get pumped when you listen to this soundtrack.
I was blown away by the title song when it started. I thought, is this the right film? Are they really doing this? Is this like a joke? No, that is the...
It got you so hyped, you want to just go out there and fight somebody.
It was fantastic. I actually, what happened was I listened to the soundtrack before the film. I can't remember why, but I did listen to the soundtrack recently.
Excellent choice.
And I thought I'd found a kind of jokey remix of something rather than the actual theme. And then I loaded up the film and watched it. And it was like, oh no, that is the theme tune. And it's just so... It's completely obnoxious, but in like the best possible way. I did love it, and I love that
very American.
I love that they just brought back the exact same theme for the second one as well. They knew that was one of the strengths of the film.
Why change a winner? Why change a winner? You know?
Exactly, and it just keeps saying Mortal Kombat over the.
Yeah, I love the guy yelling. Yeah, that's really about Mortal Kombat. This is so good.
But yeah, I completely agree. The music did a lot to carry me through the film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that soundtrack's back hurts because it carried a lot of that movie. Fun fact about that soundtrack, the man who wrote that soundtrack, also famous for writing the soundtrack for Austin Powers.
Oh my.
Oh, really?
And all their sequels, yeah. I remember reading that somewhere and just thinking it was the most insane thing I had ever read in my life.
I mean, I used to own the CD of the soundtrack for Austin Powers and Goldmember, which should tell you something about my thoughts on that. Yeah. I actually really like the music in those films.
It's good, yeah. It's real good.
Yeah.
So the film itself is directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, and we've got a bit of history with Paul W.S. Anderson on this show. Because for some reason we keep reviewing his films, even though they're all crap.
You cannot say that he's inconsistent, right? Like, he's consistent.
Yeah.
You know what you're getting when you walk into a PWS Anderson movie. You know what I'm saying? You know what you're getting.
So going into this film, I hadn't seen it before, and my hopes weren't high, I must admit, and yet still they were failed to be reached. But at first, I couldn't quite believe what I was watching. Like you say, that music kicks in, and that's obviously the first one.
It's a big swing.
Yeah, oh, it is, yeah.
But then the film itself begins, and I was thinking, all right, so yeah, the first scene, we're suddenly gonna pan out, and it's actually a film crew there, and they're making a crap film within the film. That's the joke. And then that didn't happen. But then 2 scenes later, that did happen. So
yeah, you're not. Yeah, that's true.
But then they pan back to reveal that it's a crap film within a film, but it's still crap, and it's still it still looks really bad. And I don't know.
It's like Inception, but it doesn't get slower each time. It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
But do you? I don't know if you have this sort of thing in America. Laser Zone. Are you familiar with that concept?
Oh yeah,
laser tag.
Laser tag. Yeah,
laser tag. You call it over there. Yeah. That is what this film evoked to me, with the set dressing and the lighting. It was like,
I can see that.
Watching a crystal maze a lot of the
That's
time.
a very British reference, that one. You have to explain it.
I was going to say, I don't know that one.
Okay, let's just leave it.
I barely know
forget
that
it.
one.
It's not important.
But I can't wait to fall into that YouTube rabbit hole later today.
I genuinely do think you'll enjoy it. So yeah, do
can't
look
wait.
that up.
I wrote it down. I literally wrote it down with a pen. So Crystal Maze. I'm gonna look it up.
But yeah, the production design on this is so awful, and it's the lighting. I think it's the lighting that really lets it down, because you just need to darken everything down. We don't need to be able to see this stuff closely.
I think you're on the right track here. Everything is too well lit in this movie. Like, you can see, it's almost like when you watch the original episodes of like Star Trek, right? It's like watching it in HD, you're just like, oh wow, yeah, that is maybe let's go back to standard depth, because it hides a lot of problems, right? If you see something in 4K, you're just like, oh wow, that looks so bad. Like, oh no, like you can see the duct tape on like some of the props and stuff, and you could hide that in SD, and you just can't do that. And in this movie, wow, there's a lot of metaphorical duct tape happening.
Yeah, and just like it's so obvious that just on a small soundstage with some polystyrene props and a smoke machine, like that's all we've got.
But it does have a very unique colour palette. I did kind of like that between both the films.
What would you describe the color?
It's like the
Should we just stick a
saturation's
blue
just
key
been
light on
If
this?
you were
maxed
Bob
out.
Ross and you had a palette in your hand, like what colors would you assign to this film? I'm so
Oh,
curious. I mean, obviously we have fresh blood red
Yes.
and completely forgettable brown. Like really, those are like two of the main colors.
There were a lot of bright yellows, and then things would look kind of yellow that weren't supposed to be yellow as well. But I don't know, it gave it a unique feel. It was like, okay, this does feel almost like a low-res video game come
I was
to
like,
life.
yeah, like gamey, right? Yeah, so
Yeah.
okay, like all right, okay. So do you feel like that was a intentional choice,
No,
or do you
I
feel
think
like
you've
they
all been
just sort
very
of
generous.
stumbled into it feeling like a video game because they were just bad at filmmaking?
I think I am being very generous in saying
being
that
kind.
while maybe not intentional, I think perhaps they caught some sort of, maybe not lightning in a bottle, but I think it works for the film. I think it's one of the few aspects that I'll say I didn't.
I completely disagree. In fact, I looked up the camera crew. The cinematographer on this had worked on The Mask the year before.
Oh, wow.
So obviously
Yeah.
a capable cinematographer.
Had a lot of yellow on his mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I looked up the gaffer on this to see
Really?
what became of them.
That's a deep dive.
And,
Yeah.
well, it does seem to have gone on to do plenty of work, but there does seem to be about a 10-year gap on the CV after this film. And I think that's fair. I think that's probably appropriate. Hopefully it was in prison.
I live in Los Angeles. We officially, there was an official decree that nobody who worked on this movie could work in this town for 10 years. It was a judgment. We had a jury trial. It happened.
I think that tracks, to be honest, because Paul W.S. Anderson had to go make films with like German money for about 15 years, didn't he?
Yeah, we played the sad Hulk music and we made him walk out of town.
I made a decision quite early on here, probably about 4 minutes in, that this is the worst film I've ever seen.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I really don't think I saw anything that changed that. Not to
Really?
give too
You think
much.
this is the worst movie you've ever seen?
That's extreme, Alan. Yeah.
Well, bear in
think
mind
we've
I watched
seen
Mortal
worse on
Kombat
this.
Annihilation after this. So
I was gonna say, like, I think you saw the sequel, right?
But we've seen worse than this on the podcast, haven't we? I'm
Well,
struggling to
yeah,
think
we've
of anything
we've
right
watched
now.
quite a few Paul W.S. Anderson films. But do you know what the thing is, right? And this really brought into sort of relief for me with watching these two films over the last couple of days. I watched Mortal Kombat Annihilation. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later. But obviously that's a terrible mess. But it's not really a film. I think it's just some sort of strange joke. I don't think it really counts as a film. So I don't want to... I can't say that's the worst film I've ever
Sort
seen.
of fight vignettes.
Yeah. But this... do you know what really winds me up about it? Paul W.S. Anderson just thinks he's so cool and great. And it just... And it's like... It's pathetic that this has been produced and that it was successful and people liked it and it made money. And that...
Well, was it?
It frustrates me more.
It made money, but I think it made money off the back of the video games, really, didn't it? I don't think this was a well-received film.
It was, I mean, this was critically panned. Like, this was a terrible movie. And I know that most of its money was made off of, what did it make? Like, I know it crossed $100 million. Like, it made a lot of money for the 90s. But it was, I mean, the two things really propelled this movie to its success. I am not joking when I say the soundtrack sales made this movie very popular. And also the game was at its the height. I mean, they really struck while the iron was hot. Like 95 is like exactly in the middle of like when not only everyone was playing Mortal Kombat, but even the people who weren't playing Mortal Kombat were either knew it existed or were yelling about it in like hearings in our government. Like, you know, we had like the whole like, oh, we can't have Mortal Kombat. Like this was like a big cultural like zeitgeist thing. So there was a lot of interest in what this was. So Mortal Kombat came out in like 92. Then the second one was the one that like oh my god, like it really picked up. I mean, the first one like people were mad about, but then the second one was like the next year, and it really just sort of like it leaned in very hard on all of the violence. Like And so there were just, congressional hearings about Mortal Kombat. Just, won't somebody think of the children type stuff. And I think the ESRB, the little label on your video game box that says if it's for everybody, teens, like adults only, whatever. This game was the reason the ESRB was made. Like I am probably 75% sure about that. Like if it wasn't the reason, it was part of the reason.
As I said, I did boot up a quick game on Mortal Kombat 2 earlier just to kind of remind myself what it was like, and it is mad to think that people were that up in arms about it. But I suppose all these moral panics are about usually quite tame stuff. I mean, every match you have is finished off with a fatality, Alan. I don't know if you're aware of this, fatality. But basically, it's like a big show-stopping murder, I suppose, is the word. Show-stopping
murder performance.
And they'll throw you into some spikes or the other character into some acid, and all their skin will be burned off. It's
pull your head off with your whole spine attached, like, you really rip your heart out, like take your arms off and beat you to death with them, whatever.
But it's it was rendered in 16-bit graphics, and it's cartoony and silly. It's kind of.
But at the time, it's like people were looking at those graphics and being like, this is too realistic for.
Yeah. And I suppose it was a time when people were, really upset with Beavis and Butthead because Beavis likes to say fire, or even The Simpsons going a few years back. There was a time when The Simpsons was this thing kind of degrading the bedrock
Married
of moral
with Children
society.
Also right in there. A lot of the Fox programming at that time was like a big moral panic moment, and Mortal Kombat really just rode that blood wave right to $100 million+ at the box office. So good on them.
And it is mad now just to compare it to what we have, because as I say, I do like playing games, and I don't keep up with them as much as many people do. I'm usually a fair few years behind the curve, but I'm at the point now where I am taken back sometimes. I mean, this is an old game now, but I played the reboot of Tomb Raider a few months back for the first time, and I was really taken aback whenever I die in it, because I was like, bloody hell, that's such a painful looking death they've just rendered for Lara Croft. Was that necessary? And I think now
some of the ragdoll
more...
physics, you actually just feel bad.
Yeah, just bashing heads against rocks and things, and it's like, oh, sorry, I really meant to jump then, I'm sorry. But yeah, I suppose for the time it was scary to grown-ups. And I mean, my mum is a head teacher of a primary school, and she definitely does not trust video games. She knows that I've said they're fine, and it's, just don't let a little kid play Grand Theft Auto and it's fine. But she'll tell me about kids who are obsessed with Angry Birds, and it's terrible that the birds are angry. Why are they angry? And then I'll actually show her what Angry Birds is, and she'll go, okay, that's sorry, I thought it was like a GTA thing where you kill sex workers and do drugs or whatever. But
yeah, you should be asking yourself why you're letting your kids play these very addictive games that ask for money.
Yeah, I guess thinking about it, she must have assumed it was like a British thing, but because birds is British slang for women, isn't it? She must have thought it was like Angry Birds, like some East End.
That sounds like a much more interesting game, though.
That's a BBC show, right? Like that's Angry Birds. I think I've seen that. I'm pretty sure.
But yeah, it's a real capsule of an era, and I think the movie is as well. I think it captures the 90s quite... If you wanted to show someone the 90s in 90 minutes who was, born well after the 90s, I think I'd struggle to find a better way to do it.
Well, as you know, Sol, I've got a bit of a soft spot for mid-90s action stuff because it's like the height of practical effects before CGI started sort of coming in. And I quite like that sort of thing. And I think this film does fall into that category. There is some CGI, but a lot of the stuff is practical. And it's just not well filmed is the problem.
Yeah.
When they're going on this old rickety ship to get to this place. And it's a really cool looking ship. I think the sails might be CGI because they looked a bit funny. But it just sort of floats in. It's like, if that was shot and lit and was sort of wet or something, you know, like make it look good. Mm-hmm. But it just looked like a kind of polystyrene ship that someone had built.
Yeah, it looks like they carved it out of foam. And then we're just like, okay. And then it doesn't look like most of the ship doesn't look wet. Like, just call up. Where's the set? Okay, so Warner Brothers, on the Warner Brothers lot, there is a very famous shooting set. So I forget the number of it. Of course I'm forgetting it right now. And there have been so many things shot on this set, like over, you know, decades upon decades of films. And the reason why is because it can hold a tremendous amount of water. So a lot of those synchronized swimming, like 1950s, 1960s, like extravaganzas were sort of filmed in
Busby
this.
Berkeley stuff.
Yeah. So these are sort of filmed in this particular studio. And so the Goonies was filmed in this.
Oh yeah.
The with the ship is real. It's a real thing. And they had the water and everything. It was an actual, like, living set piece with the cave and stuff. It was crazy to look at it and think that they built all that. Like, they built all of that stuff and then filled it with water. Like, it's absolutely bananas. And I believe they did some of the Pirates of the Caribbean stuff in there with water and the storms and stuff. So there are a lot of ways to make that practical that existed at the time in the 90s. Like, it existed to them. But I think the budget for this movie was, like, pretty low for what it was really odd because, like, again, it was part of the cultural zeitgeist. So I would imagine New Line would have wanted to pour a little more money into this. Obviously, they didn't pay the actors a lot because there was no incredibly famous, you know, names in this movie. There were no Raul Julias in this movie.
They spunked all the budget on Christopher Lambert.
I mean,
who was the biggest paid one on the time.
Yeah. And that guy was just lucky to be working because he didn't work on Alien because he had a coke problem. So I just did, like, you know, that guy missed out.
Imagine not getting work in the 80s because of a coke problem. I mean, how did that...
That's pretty serious.
You must have had a real coke problem. No, the problem was he wasn't taking enough.
Yeah, they're like, hey, look, we're really sorry. We got to cut you loose on here. You just aren't doing enough coke. You can't keep up with the rest of the cast. We're really sorry. They hate you and they don't want to party with you. So we have to fire you. I'm sorry. You're too square for this movie. Goodbye.
We do have Christopher Lambert as Lord Raiden, and his introduction as a character is laughable as well, in which his voice sort of bellows across some sort of Tibetan monastery or something, I don't know, and then he like waddles up.
Just thinking about that, it was so crazy.
And he's got one of those big Chinese style hats on that they have in these films.
Yeah,
and
pretty racist.
Dramatic reveal of his face. It's like, oh my god, it's who is it? Is that Jean-Claude Van
Damme?
No, it's not.
White
it's someone
man.
else.
What is happening here?
It's Highlander. Yeah.
It's Highlander. Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah.
I did keep expecting Clancy Brown to turn up as well. Actually, just something about the aesthetic of the film. I was like,
Clancy Brown as Goro with like two fake arms attached to his chest.
Yeah. I'm going to try and continue being more positive than I probably should about this film here. And I think, you know what happened is I didn't know this was directed by Paul W.S. Anderson when I started watching it. It was about halfway through the film when I sort of just looked on its IMDb page and it was like, oh, right, that explains what I'm watching.
So much.
But it did feel to me like it really tapped into classic kung fu movie vibes. Like I've recently seen a whole load of classic kung fu movies as a film ponce who, you know, is going through film history, watching all these films that Quentin Tarantino based, you know, half of his career on. And this film has the same energy. It's that kind of, it's all about the fights. There's some big bright colours. The story doesn't really matter. You know, this film might as well be dubbed based on the performances. It did really evoke those classic kung fu movies for me.
But the problem with that is those classic kung fu movies are crap. So it's evoking crap filmmaking.
Not all of them, but a lot of them are.
Yeah.
But the sorts where, you know, you might get someone who does like a fatality move on someone. And it, I don't know, it really, thinking of it that way, I think, did a lot to make me not hate the film as much as I might. I'm not going to say it's a good time, but I can't
consider
bring
it
myself...
an American pastiche of like 1970s kung fu films, like I could get behind that. I could get
made
behind
by a
that.
guy from Newcastle.
yeah, exactly.
But even the fight scenes aren't even that good, are they? I mean, I'm not that familiar with martial arts stuff, and I don't particularly think they're any good anyway. But it's like, of our three sort of principal actors, two of them aren't even martial arts trained guys. Like, they're just actors who they've given a bit of training to. And the woman in this, whose name is escaping me, but she was brought in as a last-minute replacement because Cameron Diaz was going to do it and broke her wrist doing training.
Oh, really?
So she was brought in very last minute and didn't have any training at all.
Right.
Yeah, that I remember hearing about that, and I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, good for Cameron Diaz.
How different a career it might have been. That is a weird thing to think of, isn't it? Because obviously she wasn't a huge star. She'd just done The Mask the year before.
Well, that was like her star. That was like the thing that made her a star.
Yeah, but that's it. In the Mask, it's not a particularly big role, and she's eye candy, really. But it got her noticed, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so then this comes along. It's like a kick-ass action thing, and it's a lead in this thing. There's going to be really cool fight sequences. Like, this done well on paper, like, could be quite enticing, and you think that's a good role.
Mm.
I think she smashed her wrist with a hammer after she read the script.
Should we address Goro, the four-armed beast?
Do we have
guy?
to? No, must we? Yeah.
Of all the things, like what you've been talking about, like, oh, this has kind of got a kind of cheesy appeal. Like, of all the things in this film, seeing that kind of puppeteered, weird animatronic style, I like that. I know it's not good, but
yeah,
there is something just really impressive about that kind of animatronics and puppeteering. You know, there's 12 guys with little remote control buttons and things going on all at the same time.
Well, also, you know, whenever something like that turns up in the film, it's interesting at the very least. You're like, oh, okay, something new's happening. So I did like it when he turned up. A similar thing would be when I forget the character's name now, but the guy who's got a metal bird in his hand that shoots out on a chain.
That's Scorpion.
Yeah, and again, you know, it's like it's not realised well. It looks weird. I don't really know. I mean, obviously it's from the games.
It does look super weird in the movie, though. Yeah.
But it's interesting when it happens. It's like, okay, I don't think I've seen anything like this in a film before. A weird metal mouth in a hand that shoots around on a chain.
I always had a question about this, right? So he's Scorpion. So why doesn't that thing come out of his back?
Oh, yeah. Like a big tail.
That would imply that it was something like a scorpion tail, which isn't at all. The problem is that his name
But his name's
stupid.
Scorpion!
The name is the issue. He should be called Bitey Hand.
Yeah. That's what I don't get. It's like, he should be like called like Grappler or Grapplon or something. Because it's like a grapple hook that comes out of his hands.
Yeah.
That is obviously a bit of CGI work on the old Scorpio hand. But there is a more significant use of CGI in Reptile, this little predator-style invisibility thing that runs around.
Mm.
I think, considering what, you know, the capabilities were at the time, having it this kind of hidden creature so that you're not actually going to have to figure out the textures of the skin and the lighting and stuff. It's just like, oh, it just sort of creates a weird translucent effect on the background. That's the way to go. I think that is the correct thing to do there. Because, as we'll see in Mortal Kombat Annihilation, CGI can be used erroneously sometimes.
The CGI can actually be violent against the viewer.
The thing is, though, I really, for 1995, I didn't think the CGI was that bad.
It's thought fine.
Like, it's passable. Like, it doesn't look good, but it wasn't, like, laughably awful. I've definitely seen much worse from films of this era. But then I suppose this was the era This is like Jurassic Park, isn't it? It was a time when CGI was so new that people really put a lot of time and effort into it.
Yeah, it was exciting. It was just so fun. The industry was just so excited about it.
Yeah, so it often does hold up remarkably well now, whereas, CGI from 2 or 3 years ago can look terrible when you go back to it, because it's nowadays just kind of, not always, but it can be churned out a lot more.
We watched Coming to America recently, and there's a bit in that where an elephant just wanders past, and it's a CGI'd elephant. It's like, well, how hard is it to get an elephant on a Hollywood film, But I guess somewhere someone's got a computer program with just like
permits.
An elephant button, that just says, we've already got the elephant built.
An elephant button. I love that so much. Just like this visual effects guy just sitting at a desk, but instead of a keyboard with numbers and letters on it, it's just pictures of things. And he's like, you want an elephant? I got you an elephant right here. And he just hits one button and then boom, there's a living elephant right there. I like that.
Yeah, but I just want to bring something up that occurred to me during this film, which I think is true for Paul W.S. Anderson's stuff in general, that I really didn't get a kind of sexual exploitation vibe from him, and there's really no obvious male gaze, either towards women, as you would expect, or men either. Like, even in this film, even when, Liu Kang, is that his name? The main guy, he takes his shirt off, but we're not really like... Where you watch like an 80s... We're not lingering
on the bodies part of the
Yeah, you watch an Arnie film or a Jean-Claude Van Damme film, like it's really like, oh, let's get some, baby lotion on those muscles and do a good close-up.
Yeah, you're right.
There's none of that in Paul W.S. Anderson's film, and I think that's quite a good thing. And you get that in Resident Evil, the fact that he has a strong female lead in his films.
Well, yeah, but Resident Evil does have copious shots of like Milla Jovovich in the shower and stuff. It does get a lot more into that territory.
Well, aren't they? They're together.
He married her. So that's like... the only way.
That's why it's okay.
I think Paul W.S. Anderson might be sexually repressed. He had to marry her in order to be able to film.
To feel good about it. To be like, I can do this. I'm gonna marry this lady, and then I'm gonna show off her body.
Because that's the really interesting thing that. That's not there, and I think not just that you expect it to be there because this feels like a film made by a 12-year-old boy, but also you would think at that time, the demographic this film must be aimed at, you'd think even if the director isn't going for it, the producers would be going like, come on, let's push those tits up a bit, let's get a bit of cleavage going, and let's make those shots a bit shorter. You'd think that would be a kind of prerequisite for this kind of film.
Well, and the costumes in the game are not... prudish by any stretch of the phrase. So that's a really good point. I hadn't considered that.
Yeah. So just to address the plot somewhat, we'll do this quickly. There's some sort of massive martial arts contest going on with another realm of dimension or universe or something, and if they win, they take over Earth. And so they're really making a big effort to get the best Earth fighters to fight. And
it's like Space Jam, isn't it? It all hinges around the sports match.
Yeah,
I do love the comparison to Space Jam. I think that is so appropriate.
The plot is all a bit vague and lost, and I guess that's because it's based.
They got to find the best of the best to defeat what would be invaders. Then they got to work together as a team, even though they don't want to. That's what it boils down to. It's the same plot.
I think that's roughly the plot in the games as well, right? The games aren't exactly story heavy. I think you have to read the instruction manual. There's 10 of them now. So there's actually quite a bit of Mortal Kombat lore. It's weird to even like consider that exists, but yeah, it is still a very big thing that people really love, and they love the lore and the history and all the characters and their backstories and stuff. I mean, it's like really violent soap opera.
So I have no more notes on the film. It sort of shambles to a fighty end, and then they win.
And the good guys win.
Yeah, I'd normally watch a film, a few days before we record an episode of the podcast. But this film was leaving Amazon Prime Video a few weeks back, so I watched it a bit early. And I cannot remember it at all. It's just instantly gone from my memory.
It is seared into my hippocampus. I literally remembered every single plot beat And there are lines that I actually like that. Those sunglasses were $500, asshole. Like, I remember all of that. And it is horrific that some of my brain space is still being taken up by this movie.
Yeah, you can't remember what your child's first words are, but
No, but I do, in fact, remember the entire fight. I remember this whole movie. It's upsetting how much of this movie I have kept in my heart for all these years.
So can I ask you a question, Ashley? If you obviously were brought up on Mortal Kombat, have you ever ripped someone's spinal column out?
Maybe verbally. I mean, look, I convinced my grandma to rent us Resident Evil when I was like 12, the game. And oh, that was such a mistake. Like, I regret that I think about it all the time. I will never forget that memory. Those dogs jumped through that first glass, like that hallway. Yeah. And my cousin and my cousin's 9 months older than me. Her and I sat in my room and we played that, and we walked down the hall as Jill Valentine walked down the hall. Those dogs jumped through the windows, and we screamed. I love horror movies. I have since I was a kid. I've never been so scared in my whole life. Like, I remember feeling so much fear. We would not go back into my bedroom to take the disc out. We had to make my grandma go into my room and remove the disc from the PlayStation and return it to Blockbuster because we were afraid of it. Like, it had a power. It had a power over us that was extremely strong.
You're trying to argue that children know the difference between reality and video games.
That moment, that jump scare is not to be trifled with. It is not to be trifled with. For like weeks, I was having nightmares about the eyeball. That was the title thing, was a big eyeball. And then when it's like Resident Evil, like when you started playing the game, like I that is also emblazoned in my memory. Like, I will never forget.
And that's why you still to this day kill dogs on a weekly basis.
I mean, anytime I see a dog, it's gotta go. Sorry. I can't. It's funny. You just made a connection for me that I had never considered. When I played Skyrim, I stopped playing it like an hour into the game because I rolled a character, got to the first village, and at night, a dog attacked me, like a wolf. I thought it was a werewolf or something, and I killed it, and it turned out to be the blacksmith's dog, his pet. And look, I stepped on a lot of rakes that night in Skyrim, and I murdered the whole town because look, Bethesda does this on purpose. They show you a little sign, a little pop-up that's like, oh, if you don't leave any witnesses, you won't have a wanted level. So then I had to kill the blacksmith's wife, and then I had to kill his child, and I had to kill the people who heard him screaming. It just was a domino effect that I did not intend, and I murdered just about everybody. I thought it was everyone. But that's my trauma. I carried my Resident Evil trauma into Skyrim, and it ended poorly.
I had a similar experience with Fallout 3 where you get what's the dog called in that? Dog meat or something?
Dog meat.
Yeah. And I was so, because you get these companions in the game and they can die, and if they die, they're gone, I believe. So I just became terrified that my dog was going to die, and I just ended up taking him back to my base, building a room in the base to keep the dog in, not letting him out.
Shelter.
And I would just go out and collect steaks from abandoned buildings and bring them back for him, and he just sat in a room full of steaks. But I wasn't playing the game properly because I was too terrified of my dog dying.
Oh my God. I can't play open world games properly at all. So I feel your pain. I played Fallout 3 and I became I decided to recycle the apocalypse. And so I picked up every can that I could find. And I
did that. Yeah.
I can't. I got to that first supermart and I was like, this is not good for my mental health. I have to stop.
I did the exact same thing. At the first location I got to was like an abandoned high school. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to pick up every item and take it back and sell it. And you can carry so much, and after a certain amount of weight, your character becomes unbearably slow. And I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to walk all the way back at this really slow speed, carrying everything
just to take it
all
back. Yeah, no, I feel like There were many slow motion walks in my Fallout 3 past. I never finished that game. I just the supermarkets. I got to the first one and I was like, nope. This is gonna end so badly. Like, I'm gonna have to collect every full, empty, half empty, broken, everything. Just I want to take everything in this store, and I was like, I think I have to quit this game. I think I have a problem. This is not good.
Before we move on, we like to give the films we look at a rating out of 10.
Oh, okay.
So let's do that.
Well, I know I've been veering on the more positive side with how I've been talking about the film.
But it's all relative.
Because I've dragged Paul W.S. Anderson through the mud before, so I thought I'd be nice. But it is a terrible film. As much as I didn't hate it with every fibre of my being like I do the Resident Evil movies. So I'm going to give it a 2 out of 10, which I think is harsh but fair.
Well, I said earlier, I think this is, one of the worst films I've ever seen. It's definitely in the conversation of worst films. And I've seen all of Paul W.S. Anderson's films, so that's saying something.
You liked his first ever film, didn't you? I haven't seen it. Shopping, is it?
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen that, yeah. There's just no redeeming features for me, because even if this film had been made well, I still wouldn't really like it. It's just not my cup of tea kind of thing. It's not the thing that really gets me going. So I'm going to give it a generous 1 out of 10.
Oh.
So generous.
Yeah.
So very
What would you give it,
generous.
Ashley?
I would give it, obviously, I mean, it's not a good movie, right? So you got to give it, like, I'm right in your neighborhood here. So it's like, if I'm looking at it as an objective film goer, it's like a 2. There's at least a plot, right? Like, if you look at Mortal Kombat, you got to be able to go down, right? And Mortal Kombat Annihilation certainly does that. So I like to think that it's a solid 2. But for me, like, having seen it at the time, I would have given it like a 6.
Ooh, okay.
So at the time, like in 1995, I would have given this movie a solid 6. I would have been like, this was awesome. I had fun watching it. It was kind of dumb, but it was
Gonna buy the soundtrack.
But it was cool, and I love the soundtrack. Like, I'm hype about the soundtrack. So I feel like I would have given it a 6 in 1995. But today, yes, I would give it a 2.
Well, that's fair.
Very noble of you to throw your childhood into the dustbin.
But talking about the worst films ever made, as you say, Alan, the sequel, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, is on IMDb's bottom 100 movies of all time list, quite firmly.
And I think that's fair.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I don't know. I can't say, honestly, that I noticed a world of difference between the two films. And maybe that's just because I forgot the first one pretty much by the time I came to watch the second one, which was earlier today.
So first of all, this film, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, made 2 years later, it was directed by the cinematographer of the first film.
Oh, really?
Who was not a director. And that whenever they bring this for a cheap sequel, they get the cinematographer to do it. That's a good sign of we really don't care about anything other than what it looks like. We don't care about characters or actors.
They kept the look of the film intact, that oversaturated kind of crazy
cheap
colour
lights.
Palette. And
well, it's just because they only had 3 lights and 2 filter gels, so you know.
And the theme tune's back, the same theme from the first one.
Well, it's already been paid for. But yeah, so only a couple of the actors return, even though it picks up pretty much as it leaves off the first film. Some of the actors are just straight up replaced. They bring in another couple of characters as well. And it's just, like, this big bad boss is going to kill us. We have to team up to fight it. I mean, it's the Avengers, basically, but...
Bad.
With better lighting. So... The major difference, I think, apart from just, obviously no one cares at all, is heavy use of CGI, of 97 era CGI.
And again, not the worst CGI I've ever seen for 1997.
Really?
It wasn't...
Name one thing.
There's some pretty bad mid-90s CG stuff.
Well, this guy also went on to direct The Scorpion King, I believe, so...
Oh, that's worse. Yeah, there you go, right there. Much worse CGI.
I think actually the worst... So, I don't know if you guys would agree, but I think the worst CGI is, like, right around 2000, where it's like the technology was there, and everyone got too excited about it. Like the Phantom Menace is a perfect example of this. Like George Lucas was ahead of his time on the Phantom Menace, the way that he wanted to film it, because now they filmed The Mandalorian the way that that Phantom Menace should have been filmed, but we just didn't have the technology. But because all they had available to them was CGI, it was like, well, just CGI everything. We'll just do it all in CGI. And it's just so bad. Like, and it ages so poorly. It's so bad.
Yeah. I think there's a value to this early crap CGI, but it's got that early crap CGI charm. It's crap because we were still inventing it, we were still figuring it out, as opposed to it's crap because we haven't put the effort in, which I think you were alluding to earlier, Sol. This early stuff where they were building it from scratch, as opposed to just, hitting the dragon button.
I think this is about the last point where you'd see stuff like that before it did just become bad. I mean, as you say, I think I would struggle to think of worse CGI than... It wasn't in The Scorpion King, was it? It was in The Mummy 2 when the Scorpion King turns up to set it up. I think that is probably the worst CGI I've ever seen. That kind of PS2 era Dwayne The Rock Johnson model they use. It was... and it doesn't look that bad here. It doesn't look good, but there's a bit of personality about that weird dragon monster at the end when that person turns into a monster. There's a bit of ropey charm to it.
This movie, I will argue this movie is a cult classic.
It cult in the sense that it sort of brainwashes you and you don't
amongst a demographic of like older millennials, maybe younger Gen Xers, like this movie is a cult classic.
Well, that's it. And that's just about, you see it when you're 11, 12 years old and it's like, it's cool because you don't need a compelling plot or characters or good lighting. You just
want to see all the characters you see in your game, and then they're doing all the stuff that was in the game. Yeah, it did what it set out to do. It's actually a faithful adaptation. I would argue it's a faithful adaptation of the game, right? So as opposed to Super Mario Brothers, which is bananas, right? Like it's just it is a fever dream on 10 tons of magic mushrooms, like no pun intended. It is literally like this movie is a very faithful adaptation of the game.
Do you know what would be really great? Would be a proper faithful adaptation where it starts, two guys fight, one of them wins and turns to the camera and goes, "Victory!" And then it cuts to him fighting someone else. And then it just carries on like that.
It's just that.
For an hour and a half.
All the way up the chain, I mean, I probably would have enjoyed that more, to be honest. I'd have a better sense of the plot. I really did feel like I was someone's grandparent watching this one. I'm pretty good with high concepts and lore, but I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't follow it. It wasn't that it was complicated so much as I couldn't bring myself to engage with it long enough to figure out what was happening.
It's also just it's very video gamey, right? Like, I mean, it's just that inherently is, games at that time just had very thin kind of plots or a story. Like it was very much just like gameplay, and that was it. Like it was so rare at that point to be playing games that had like an overarching story to tell you, right? Like Legend of Zelda maybe, and like, but even then it's like, the basics were hit. It's not, wasn't there was a lot of incoherent weirdness happening in game narrative for a long time, and some would argue continues today. So just not on the same level.
I recently tried to get my mum to play a Crash Bandicoot game just for the hell of it, and it was fascinating because she's got no concept of what video games are, and I was trying to explain to her, like, no, they're going through back in time to collect crystals, and she was just like, why is there fruit floating? I don't understand. She just didn't. The very mechanics of a video game were so baffling to her. So yeah,
I love that. It's
I
charming.
do forget how how weird it is, really, these like video game grammar that you just have in for
it's true. There's a whole lexicon. There's a whole lexicon of and familiarity that you have to really like suspend your disbelief in a way that is so different from movies and TV shows. Like, it's so different. Like, if you watch The Mandalorian and there were like coins he had to collect, you'd be like, what the fuck is going on?
I'd like
here?
it a lot
What
more,
is this?
actually.
But
that would be fantastic.
There is literally a language of games that is, you have to really be fluent in it to be willing to suspend your disbelief for certain things, like collection, especially the collection aspect of it. And it's just really interesting to frame it that way. That's an interesting way to think about it.
And that is, that totally different language is why they don't translate to film particularly well, as we have seen over the last 30
historically,
years.
Historically,
I mean, I think the other thing is I said this way back when we did our Mario episode, but that was so long ago, I'll repeat it. But one thing a lot of video game movies struggle with as well is that most of the big iconic video games for a while were kind of just ripping off movies. They, Resident Evil was essentially someone saying, oh, this Night of the Living Dead's good, can we make a game with this core premise? And Metroid did it with Alien. That was a way that people approached making games, because the plot was such a small part of them. It was still a brand new experience because you were playing it. But then that means when you come to turn that game into a film again, you don't want it to just be a complete rip-off of a film that already exists. But I suppose that's not really an issue here, because Mortal Kombat isn't clearly just based on a film in the same way. But yeah, I mean, I don't really have a huge amount to say about Annihilation other than it's kind of the same, but not as good. I will say, again, trying to be nice about it, there's lots of variety in it. There's lots of different things.
In what sense?
There's so many movie things in it.
There was someone with 4 arms. There was like a demon guy with knife arms.
Different looks.
Yeah.
There were a lot of choices in Annihilation.
Yeah.
I'm going to say a lot of choices. Like, a lot of choices were made in that movie. What if we pretended Annihilation didn't exist and, like, we had to give the sequel to the original Mortal Kombat to Ann Anderson, a different Anderson director? Would you give it to Paul Thomas Anderson or would you give it to Wes Anderson? Because I feel like there are 2 really amazing movies here that would be very different from the PWS Anderson version. I'm gonna say I would love to see a Wes Anderson, a violent twee take on Mortal Kombat. I feel like that would be incredible.
Wes Anderson would lend himself very well to a scrolling video game, just the
kind of 90-degree camera angle.
Scroller,
yeah.
There's really a lot of things I feel like Wes Anderson could get into. Little, like, claymation murder fatalities. Like, come on. It's all right there for him. Little dioramas. Like, oh, it'd be so great.
But who would Bill Murray play?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like if we're just going to continue with the cultural appropriation, you just throw him in that terribly racist hat and you call him Raiden. It's good. I actually think Bill Murray could just play Bill Murray. Like, if we're going to go with Mortal Kombat 11, he could play anybody.
Yeah, just put him in as himself, like Zombieland and Space Jam. He does that. He just turns up as himself.
Just shows up as himself. Like, I think that works.
That would be great. They go to the Tibetan monastery. They have to climb a mountain to meet the guru to get his advice, and it's Bill Murray, and he's just like, this is what I'm doing these days. I got that going for me.
Personally, I would pick Paul Thomas Anderson to direct it purely because I know Paul W.S. Anderson goes by W.S. Anderson because he got annoyed that people kept confusing him with Paul Thomas Anderson.
How dare he interpret it that way around?
Because of this vendetta, I think he'd get annoyed about it. So I just do it to spite him. But I think we'd get a very serious take on it. I don't really know how.
Very dark. Very dark. There will be blood. It would be extremely serious.
Yeah.
Daniel Day-Lewis could be a reptile like that. I feel like I'd actually be a little scared for Daniel Day-Lewis to play any character, a fighting character in a Mortal Kombat movie, because he is a method actor and I feel like that would be a danger to society.
Yeah, he would go and live as a reptile.
Yeah.
Could we just have him as his character Daniel Plainview from There Will Be Blood, though? Because he does, he beats a guy up in that film with a bowling ball, doesn't he?
John Rambo's in Mortal Kombat. There's no reason why we could not just have Daniel Plainview in a a Mortal Kombat movie.
Yeah.
And his fatality could be called the milkshake. It's right there. And it's just he keeps Paul Dano in a little closet and he just pulls it. He murders Paul Dano. Like, it has nothing to do with the actual. I really feel confident about this, you guys. We should really write a letter to New Line. I feel like they might let us have a mulligan on this.
I think they should make all three, or like all the three big Anderson directors should make one, and then
Just
it's like a
take a
nice
crack at it.
trilogy of
Yeah.
Well, just for the sake of completion, shall we rate Mortal Kombat Annihilation?
For me, there's not a lot in it. I'd give it a 2 out of 10 again, which is arguably generous.
That is so very generous.
Well, I would argue that Mortal Kombat Annihilation is better than Mortal Kombat, but obviously,
Really?
it's yeah, because it's like if you gave a monkey a camera and then you went, oh well, that's a bit crap, isn't it? Like, yeah, well, what did you expect? It's, it's not a real film, so I can't judge it in the same way. But yeah, obviously it's a 1 out of 10. There's nothing happening.
Wow.
I'm giving it like a 0.5. I mean, I think it's just even. It's not. I mean, it's pretty bad. It's not even a movie. That's what should be on the poster and the box. Like, it's not even really a movie.
Right, well, yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Ashley. It's been an absolute joy. Is there anything you would like to plug?
Just you can come hang out with me on Twitter. Like, I work. I make video for CNET for their YouTube channel. That's my day job, and that's really fun. And it's like tech product based. So it's, if you want to come talk about pop culture and Mortal Kombat, you may do so at my Twitter, which is my name. It's at Ashley Esqueda, and my last name's Esqueda.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Thank you for making us watch the Mortal Kombat films.
Thank you for forcing me to re-enjoy this movie through the eyes of my 12-year-old self. It was really fun, and I thank you for having me. This was delightful, and it's always fun to talk about these sort of like campy cult classics, which I very dearly appreciate. I appreciate them. I may not love them, but I appreciate them.
Do join us for our next episode, because it's our big annual Oscars blowout, where we will be discussing the nominees of this year's Oscars, which are remarkably all right, to say that nothing's come out in the cinema for like the last year and a half. So yeah, thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.